Hello, everybody. E here, or should I say E Johnson. All right. So we are getting back into this. This is my new book, The Last Freak Show, written under pen name S.E. Johnson. This is book 1, Flame and Fortune. Links to where you can buy the book, sign copies, all that stuff down there in the doobly-doo. We're going to jump into it. We're going to get started at 6:30 since I have it scheduled for then. I thought I would come on early and say hello to everybody. When I post the VOD, I will mark what time the video actually gets going. I'll probably just cut this whole part out. But anyways, how y'all doing? What y'all up to? I got some hot tea with lemon and honey so that my voice makes it. Also, the heater is going in the background, so my apologies if it's annoying, but I don't think y'all were expecting audiobook quality out of this anyways. This is just for people who can't afford the book. So we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Let's see here. 2 hours. All right. Hey, Sloan. How you doing? We're going to get started at 6:30, so 9 more minutes. How you been? What you up to? All that good stuff. Let me let the Discord know we are in here. All right. Okay. All right. For those of you just popping in, I'm going to be continuing off where I left off last week. I believe it was last Monday. Yeah, so the daily readings are completely out of the window. But I'm going to try at the very least to do one a week. I am reading my new book, The Last Freak Show, that I wrote under the pen name S.E. Johnson. This is book 1, Flame and Fortune. It's a big chunker, 552 pages. You can grab your copy down there in the links in the doobly-doo, down there in the description. Anyways. Okay. Get heated up here. Trying to warm up. It is currently 25. We're supposed to get snow this weekend in central Alabama. So it's so cold my phone won't recognize my fingers. All right. All right, we're going to get started in another 6 minutes. Y'all want to chat until then? Let me know what's going on in y'all's life. Still at 2 reviews everywhere. great. Googly moogly. It's hard to get people to review these days. At least in the proper way. I mean, I could be like some of these other folks and pay for them, but no. What are y'all drinking? I got hot tea with honey and lemon, so my voice holds out. Ugh. My computer wants me to upgrade to Windows 11 version 24H2. Ugh. Oh, I got top chat on. I'm sorry. If anybody's said anything and I didn't see it, I apologize. 5 more minutes. Anyways, so if you're just tuning in, this is 3 years in the making. It's book 1 of 5. This is Flame and Fortune, book 1. The next one is Masks and Magic. Then you have Vices and Vengeance, Soil and Sideshows, and then Rubes and Ruin at the end. They will be out every December. Every December. Let me do a little bit of that. If you like this, you'll love this. Let me do that right now. All right. So, Catherine Dunn's Geek Love. If you love this, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love it. Links down there in the doobly-doo where you can get a signed copy or just get you a regular old copy over there at Amazon. I got a couple other ones. Okay. If you like this, Ohio by Stephen Markley, you will love this. If you like Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, you will love this. For those of you just joining us, we are not restarting. We're getting back to this. We left off on subchapter 12. So I will be starting this in the next 3 minutes. But again, if you like Betty by Tiffany McDaniel, you'll love The Last Freak Show. If you loved Ohio by Stephen Markley, you'll love The Last Freak Show. If you like Geek Love by Catherine Dunn, you'll love The Last Freak Show. You see a pattern here? If you like Jesmyn Ward, if you like John Irving, all them homies. Salutations and good tithings, Mr. Jones. How you doing? Mr. Jones and me. Gotta be quiet. Gotta be quiet. I had my last free show with Betty in Ohio. Part of that Geek Love. Hey, Blue, how you doing? I can't stay, but wanted to pop in and tell you my copy arrived last week. Stay warm. Hopefully we don't get snowed in. Yeah. I hope it's not like the one, when was it? 2018, 2019, something like that. When did we get that awful snowstorm where everybody was out without power for like 3 days straight? Scooby-Dooby-Doo. We're almost there, folks. 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes and I'll start reading. Scooby-Dooby-Doo. I might have to put this Joker on. I'll mess up my hair doing this. Oh no, not the hair. Yeah, that'll work. 2017, I almost had to sleep at my office. That's crazy. Yeah, it was bad. We went over my middle sister's house, and she had a fireplace. That's the only reason we went over there. But yeah, power was down for 3 days. All that good stuff. If you're just now joining us, I see y'all coming in. All right, we're reading from The Last Freak Show, my new book under the pen name S.E. Johnson. This is book 1, Flame and Fortune. Each subsequent book will be out in December. Hair. Shut up. I am balding. Not gracefully. Yeah. 1 more minute. and we're going to jump back into this. We left off on subchapter 12. So if you're reading along at home, that's where we're at. That's where we're picking up. I've seen more hair on bacon. Shit. You jerk. You're all the way bald. Yeah, but you shave your stuff, don't you? Your stuff. You shave your stuff. Signed copies are already here. I'm waiting on mailers to come in. So for those of you waiting on signed copies of the book, it'll be probably next week. They'll be going out. What's today? Wednesday? Yeah, they should be here Friday, and then I'll get them out Monday. Hopefully. Yeah, today's Wednesday. All right. Just let you know, I have a goal up here. 5 super chats. If you do a super chat, depending on which tier you get, you either get a digital copy or a signed paperback. If you just do a super chat, your own super chat, a $30 super chat will get you a signed copy. If you're in the US, 50 will get you a signed copy if you live in the UK. If you just want to buy it in the UK, then it's $100, and then I refund you whatever I don't use for the shipping. So I just sent one out. Use my last mailer to do it. I just sent one out last week, and it was $32 going to Yorkshire. I shave my stuff, pause, but my hairline requires the baldy. I understand. All right, so it is now 6:21. We are picking up on page 59. We're only going to 89 tonight. We are picking up page 89, the bottom of page 89. If you have the paperback, it is subchapter 12. We are reading from The Last Freak Show by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. It's book 1, Flame and Fortune. All right, let's do this. 5 books in this series. If you don't want to wait and listen to me read the whole thing, links are down there in the doobly-doo. Go get you one. I'm in desperate need of reviews, so if you read it, please review it. Here we go. 12. The circus had switched properties. Father Thyme figured that out the hard way. Having traveled to the old Carter property, expecting to see cars and lights and that massive big top, he was instead welcomed by an empty field overgrown with tumbleweed and wild green onions. Confused, he thought to head home and ask Grandpa why he'd lied to him. Had he wanted Father Thyme out of the house for some reason? Did this have something to do with Father Thyme's calculations? The money? Nothing made sense about the situation. He drove back through town, of which there wasn't much, until he saw the poster on the power pole out front of Jules' General Store. He pulled over and read the sign. This year's circus was being held beside the derelict Neely Church, which had closed its doors for good in 1919 after the pastor's son died in the Great War. Old man Neely lost his faith and closed up shop to move farther west. Some said he landed in California, while others, people Father Thyme trusted, said the man had moved to the Oregon coast and died of grief by the ocean. Father Thyme preferred the latter story for some reason. Something about dying by the water appealed to him. It was a 4-mile drive from Jules' General Store to the Neely Church, but Father Thyme started seeing lights and activity a full mile away from the run-down house of God. The big top was brighter than it had been that first year, or perhaps the Neely property had been chosen because the parking lot next to the main building where the tent had been erected had pole lights that still worked. 4 of them in all, 1 in each corner of the square lot. A chain-link fence had been put up around the circus proper, with a slapdash ticket booth made of pallets installed at the gate. Father Thyme went through the motions, as he had years before, to get inside, but instead of going straight for the main tent, he lurked outside, bouncing on his tiptoes, scanning the area for a familiar face, one that had been in every dream of his for the past 3 trips around the sun. The crowd outside thinned over these few minutes until there was surely more people inside than out, and Father Time thought he'd better grab a seat or a spot in the standing room section like he had the last time before all the spaces were gone. This year's circus goers were a rowdy bunch. Father Time cringed against the cacophony, hoots and hollers, rude catcalls and shrieking whistles created by those gathered in the tent. The air was alive with piercing sound, and the young man could barely stand it. If they didn't quiet down, he'd have to leave. His head couldn't handle the noise, and a headache would surely ruin any plans he had for the evening. He found a spot in the seats, 4 rows from the first line of chairs, but a full 7 rows away from the velvet rope, the standing room area being 3 rows deep, all by its lonesome. He sat down, saw he couldn't see worth a fig, and stood again, the edge of the wooden seat pressing into the backs of his knees. Standing, he could just barely see over the people in front of him. Thank God he wasn't really here for the show, or else he'd be irrationally irate over the inconvenience. He was so busy seeking the woman who had given him the best night of his life to date that he missed her sneaking up behind him. When she laid her hand on his shoulder, he lurched forward, crashing into the tall man in coveralls standing in front of him. The burly brute snatched around and leered at Father Time with his one good eye. The other one was milky with cataract and dripping some form of yellow liquid like lemony tears. Father Time apologized vehemently until the man turned back to the show, thankfully ending the chance that Father Time would be leaving the tent in a stretcher. When he finally twisted to see who was behind him, he found her giggling into her fist and felt like an even bigger fool. Had she been waiting for him, watching from the shadows, plotting her approach? Had she located him the second he hit the property? If so, that meant she'd thought of him since the last time. What had she been thinking about him? His heart couldn't handle the idea, and redlined in his chest, overworked with the possibilities that their night together had meant as much to her as it had to him. "Hey, Jew," she said in that beautiful accent of hers. "Hey, Jew." "I've been looking for you," he called over the raucous crowd. Hopefully the show would begin soon, and all these people would shut the hell up, because he couldn't stand much more of their noise. "You want to go outside?" she asked. Giggle, giggle. "Yes, please," he cried. Nothing would make him happier at present than escaping the overwhelming din of those surrounding him. Outside, she led him around the tent to a line of train cars still on the tracks. Father Time wondered how long they could block this track before he saw the line switch down the way a bit. 2 tracks ran behind Neely Church, one connected to the other, pulling away from the main line like a pregnant belly before curving back into the main track. There must have been an offload station here before the church was built, was all the information Father Time could garner from the track placement. "How'd you know where to find me?" he asked as they stepped up onto the stairs leading into the caboose. "It's not hard to find you, gringo. You give off an aura." She pulled open a door set into the rear wall of the caboose and waved Father Time inside. "I give off a..." Father Time stepped inside and was instantly struck dumb by the car's interior, adding, "What?" before he trailed off. "An aura, silly man." Where are we?" "This is my uncle's car. You remember Jaime?" "Jaime? Sure, but I never met him," Father Time said in a dreamy voice. The compartment had utterly stolen his attention. He heard everything she was saying, but not much of it registered. He knew she was talking, but just not what she was talking about. The entirety of the cabin was red and black with gold accents, and Father Time, having panned fool's gold in the mountains with a toothless hillbilly named Homer when he was 10, thought that the gold here might actually be real. Crushed velvet covered everything. The walls, the chairs with golden claws for feet, the sofa with its black silk throw pillows and glittering trim. Gaudy was a word that Father Time wasn't acquainted with, but it fit all the same. The roof of the cabin, which was crushed red velvet as well, had a sprinkling of gold dust on it, like gilded stars in a crimson sky. Paintings of places Father Time had never seen the likes of hung on the walls, abstract images of cubicle faces and round boxes, expressionist work that boggled his mind, a still life of a bowl of fruit, but instead of the expected bananas, apples, pears, or oranges, the bowl held internal organs, a heart, pair of lungs, two wet-looking eyeballs, wall-eyed, looking different directions, and a tongue curled around a stout, veiny penis. This last one, the bowl of people pieces, intrigued Father Time more than it disturbed him, and he had no idea why that should have been. Some instinctive part of him said he should be appalled, that he should ask questions, but instead, he simply pointed at the bowl of gore, smiled, and said, "I like that one." Yeah, that one is good. Pedro painted it for Tio. Tio? Father Time asked, as if he should know who she was talking about. Tio means uncle. Your Uncle Jamie? Sorry, your Uncle Jaime? See. See what? She laughed like a schoolgirl. Come on, gringo. I have something to show you. The old man has a secret. This arrangement of tanks and tubing and hissing steam below the ground, away from prying eyes. He works at his secret for 3 hours a night, while the world upstairs sleeps. He does this to protect the one he loves, his ward, so that they might never know the struggles of the past. A few more batches, and he can be done forever and always. Just a few more batches. Just a few, he asks of a God, and God is silent in his judgment. She led Father Time through a door and into the second train car. He was surprised to find himself in a greenhouse on wheels, 4 rows of flora stretching the entire length of the car, with 3 walkways separating them. He could name over half the plants on display. There were a few he'd only seen pictures of in horticulture books, and several more he hadn't seen anywhere, ever. Through the glass walls, the big top stood 24 yards from the train. Through the roof, Father Time saw the moon, outlined as it was with a halo of white light, everything speckled with a generous smattering of stars. The view stole his wind. He had to remind himself to breathe. She laid a hand on his forearm, and the skin there prickled with goose flesh. "Are you okay?" she asked. "It's so beautiful in here, especially the sky," he said, gazing upward. Awe smothered him in its embrace. The old man hears something. Down here, under all this earth, in the shelter he dug out during the Great War, in case the tumult reached their shores, the old man can hear muffled voices. He hasn't heard car engines, but that doesn't mean anything. The pop and crackle of the fire under the tanks has covered much, too much, it would seem, and the hiss of steam and smoke as it escapes through the exhaust port in the ceiling has masked whatever the fire has not. Definitely voices, and they are approaching. "You grow all this yourself?" Father Time asked. "See, that's why they call me Mother Nurture." "Mother Nurture?" he said, confused. "No, Mother Nature?" he said, confused. No, nurture. Nature is chaos. Nurture is order. You can nurture nature, but you can't nature nurture. That's a mighty fine riddle you have there, he said, laughing, not having any idea what she was talking about. Nurture isn't a natural response, it's a choice. Nature gives no choices, and I like choices. That makes more sense, no? He hated when she ended her questions like that because it made him feel stupid. He shrugged. I suppose so. So you like? She asked. Love it. I see a lot of these all day, every day. My grandpa owns a farm, but I reckon I told you that already. I used to work the fields well, until we had enough money to hire a crew. Now I run the crew. Father Time lapsed into memories of Thomas, the man's glowing smile, where it was painted with striking clarity and realism across the canvas of his recollections. He'd loved that smile until it burned away in a fire of disgust. Now all he could see was Thomas's disbelieving features glaring at him, his hand snatching from between Father Time's legs, the thudding of feet downstairs, the front door slamming, the "You sure you okay?" she asked again, and Father Time tugged himself from himself, stuffing the image of Thomas's smile going from day to night underneath his present consciousness. Yeah, no, I don't know. I guess so. My mind is everywhere else but here right now, but I want to be here. He took her tiny, soft hand in his large, calloused palm, dwarfing it. With you. That's sweet, she said, and for a moment he thought she was mocking him, until he dove into her eyes and splashed into the love there. Love? Was it truly love? This tension in his chest? This tornado in his guts? Again he wondered, has she has she thought about me since last time? Had what they'd done together replayed over and over in her mind like it had in his? Could she ever love him back, knowing she had to leave him behind again? And knowing that, could he let her love him? The last time should have been the last time. The old man knows this now. His luck has run out. He's sure of this. As sure as he knows that he woke up this morning. As sure as he is that there's a God in heaven and that one day he will stand before him, awaiting judgment. But he's in for a different kind of judgment now, the judgment of his fellow man. He can go up and meet them like a respectable person, or he can wait to be found, hidden away like a dirty lie. It won't take long, he knows. Either they'll find the door in the cellar or the escape hatch under all that hay above his head. Either way, they're coming, and he's just glad that it's finally over. He dumps a bucket of cold water on the flames under the tanks. The cave he cut into the earth fills with steam as thick as cumulus clouds, thick as guilt. His eyes burn as he decides to face his fate like a man. What's this? Father Time asked of the five-leafed plant in the center of it all. He leaned in to take a sniff and recoiled instantly. That smells like a skunk. She tittered as he recovered. You've never had marijuana? She asked. Who? Marijuana gringo. Weed. Oh, no, I haven't had it, but I've heard of it. I never did hear it called Mary. What was it again? Marijuana. Sorry. Marijuana, she said, rolling the R. Marijuana what? He joked. She slapped him playfully across the shoulder. You never smoke any? Not even once? He shook his head. Never had the chance. What does it do? Oh, Poppy, this stuff? She grinned mischievously. This stuff is special. Can you spend the night? I, uh, I, He heard his grandfather in his head, telling him he was a grown man who could do whatever he wanted, and nodded 3 times in quick succession. You act like you were hoping I'd ask you to stay. Her smile was pure lust and anticipation, eyes smoldering in their sockets. He could damn near feel her mouth on him. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. Good, gringo, good. We smoke, then we make love. Then we smoke some more. In the morning, you will float home and start missing me all over again. Father Time's face darkened. I wish this would never end. What is this, lovely? This, he said, gesturing to everything around him, her included. You, me, this train car, the circus? I wish I never had to leave. Wishes are good. They give you hope. But nothing lasts forever, gringo. Everything must change. And some things go away forever. It is the way that it is. I would love for you to stay with me here, but not even I am staying here. We'll be on the road tomorrow afternoon, but I will be back in a few years, and we can do it all over again. Every time I come, I will look for you, my bearded boy, my love, my love. Did that mean she felt the same about him that he felt about her, or did she only love their time together? The idea of him in her bed or his bench seat as it had been before. What if he shouldn't ask what he wanted to ask? He shouldn't. It was a terrible yet pressing thought to just throw everything to the wind and love her for the rest of his life, to be with her until they both aged and grayed and faded away to nothing. Tempting, but impossible, right? Right? What if... What, gringo? He shrugged. Nothing. Never mind. You want to come with me, no? No, I mean, yes. I mean, Jesus. I don't know what I mean. Slow down, Poppy. Slow down. Let there be this night. Then you can go home and think about me until next time, see? Yeah, he said, his voice a tiny, trembling creature in his throat. Yeah, I see. The old man takes the cellar stairs slowly, one foot up, then the other, to the same step, holding there until his heart pushes him up another step and his mind screams for him to stop. Another step, both feet, same step, and another. There is a way out of this, he knows, but he also knows he couldn't use this way out without saying goodbye. He has options, but none of them are good. There'd be no storybook happy ending. Not this time. Not ever again. He opens the door and sets fate into motion. They'd moved back to her uncle's train car, the caboose, and Mother Nurture rolled a marijuana cigarette, something she'd called a joint, and lit it with a wooden match. She tucked the rough potato sack bag, which held the loose weed, back into her shirt, where it dangled between her heavy breasts like the motionless arm of a grandfather clock. She took several lung-filling puffs before sitting down in one of her uncle's crushed velvet chairs. On the last puff, she held her breath and passed the joint to Father Time. Father Time, having never smoked so much as pipe tobacco in his life, sucked greedily at the tip of the joint. The smoke strangled him as soon as it hit his lungs, and he bent over, barking like a feral dog, his eyes on the verge of popping from his head to land on the garishly red carpet below. Easy, gringo, easy. Baby steps, Mother Nurture said, clapping and laughing. Mira aquí, mira. Here, before you waste it. She pinched the joint from his outstretched fingers. She pulled hard, twice, and exhaled a haze of blue smoke that crept into every nook and cranny of her uncle's cabin. The world tilted, and Father Time lost his balance. He flopped into an empty chair with golden claws for feet and lay back against the headrest. The paintings on the walls came alive, a mass of swirling shapes and alternating colors. He swam through the warm pudding of it all, the air in the cabin thick with heat and moist with bluish fog. Alive. He felt alive for the first time in his life, awake as if he'd been asleep all his life. This must be how newborns reacted to the world, everything so new and confusing, yet being unable to express how any of it made them feel. His head spun suddenly, and sick threatened to rocket up his throat and out through his mouth. Somehow, he kept it in. Am I going to die? He asked in a voice that sounded a millennium away. The man standing on the other side of the cellar door was familiar to the old man, and the old man couldn't place the stranger's face, not at first. He'd seen it only once, after all, and it had been hidden behind a white hood for most of their short-lived conversation. The old man had thought it weird that the man had taken off his hood. The thought that this man had revealed himself then, just so that, when the time finally came, he could stand before the old man and say, "Remember me?" chilled the old man from head to foot. "Thought I told you never to come back here," said the old man. "I don't remember that," said the out-of-costume clansman. "What I do seem to recall is that you wouldn't let us search your property. Said that boy wasn't hiding here. But he was. We found him anyway. Yes, we sure did, by God. We found him and took care of him. And now, thanks to my Uncle Bobby right here, you might know him as the county sheriff most likely. Yeah, so thanks to him, we came back with a search warrant. Only we ain't hunting negras this round, old timer. No siree. We're here looking into a rumor. Seeing as how I can smell that rumor pumping out of that pipe out back of your land, I say it ain't no rumor. Now, Bobby, I say this one time, that there rumor is pure D fact. I swear for Christ and all his angels it is. Bobby, a blond man with gray in his sideburns and mustache, stuffed his paws into his uniform pants and rocked on his heels. "Seems so, nephew. Seems so." The old man's face drooped. He knew when he was caught, and he was caught good this time. Only one secret left, but that would have to wait. "Lead the way, old timer," said the clansman, stepping out of the way. They made love on the couch, and somehow, someway, this time was even better than the first. He was numb all over, yet his nerves were working overtime, especially the bundle of them between his legs. His heart beat a frenetic, frantic rhythm, and he could feel every pulse, accompanied by the wet heat down there. They came separately 2, 3 times, before their orgasms fell into lockstep, and they quaked as one. Moving from worshiping each other with their mouths, Mother Nurture told Father Time, "I want you inside me." The coupling was awkward at first. Him on top, her cringing beneath him being unsure what to do with the jutting member of his collected anatomy, and her trying to be patient despite her lust. Finally, she rolled him onto his back, straddled him, and guided his length into her. She screamed loud enough to vibrate the glass in the windows, her face contorted in pain. Are you okay? He panted. You're so goddamn big, Ringo. Fuck! She eased off him, leaving the tip inside, tucked between her dripping labia, then glided down as if the clouds were lowering her softly onto him. She winced again, but the grimace was soon replaced by an ever-widening grin. Warm fluid dribbled down his shaft to travel his folds, like rainwater sluicing through canyons, as he raised herself again, as she raised herself again, increasing the speed of her movements ever so slightly, her slick interior allowing him in farther each time, until she was bucking on top of him, bucking like an untamed Mustang. She added a gyration to her hips, and he moved inside her, a spoon stirring cream into coffee. She stalled suddenly, seizing up like an overworked, oilless engine, her thighs locking, muscles bulging in her neck and forearms as her fingers dug into his chest, seeking his heart, pushing, her weight and gravity mashing down on him, up, down, up, down, up, down, her palms crushing his chest, and he found that struggling to breathe wasn't that urgent of a problem. He could die here, right now, and have no regrets. The old man leads the sheriff and his hateful nephew to the barn, where he is forced to move all the haystacks on top of the escape hatch without a shred of help from the onlookers gathered. 4 of them in all, the sheriff, his 2 deputies, and the clansman. Now open her up, Grandpa, says the clansman. You heard him, says the sheriff, adding urgency to the situation by placing a large hand on the butt of his holstered revolver. The old man picks a key from a ring of them he has attached to his belt and undoes the padlocks keeping the hatch secure. He sets both locks aside, then throws the double doors wide. The sheriff and the trio of men with him follow the old man into the cloudy confines below. The fire he'd put out with that bucket of water still steams as it smolders. White smoke drifts out of the way they'd come in, clearing the air below enough to see so they could clearing hang on here, I lost my place. Clearing the air below enough so they can see the 4 main steel tanks and all the copper tubing running from each drum. The old man is proud of the still. He'd made it with his own 2 hands, after all, with only lifting help from the driver and his companion on the day they'd delivered everything. He'd paid them 3 times their worth before sending them on their way. 2/3 of that money had been to buy their silence. Had they turned him in, finally? Had there been a reward worth more than that extra money he'd passed along to them? Or had it been someone else? Douglas over at Jules General, maybe? Probably not. If the old man's moonshine operation got shut down, Douglas and Vanessa would be back in the poorhouse again. And if Jules General Store died, the town wasn't going to be too far behind it. Some setup you got here, Gramps, says the clansman. Shame to see it shot through with holes. That's how y'all deal with them, eh, Bobby? Arrest the owner and blow the still to shit? That about sums it up, yeah. But I got plans for this here one. Because you're right, nephew. It'd be a shame to waste such fine engineering skills. Such as this here obviously is. Ain't that right, Mr. Waycott? The old man says nothing. Well, says the clansman, guess you better get started undoing all this work, and slowly at that, you hear, because we want to be able to put this back together, later. All 4 men chuckle and what the old man wouldn't give to have his shotgun right now, to blow that laughter out of their backsides and piss in the leftover holes. But they want him to go slow, and that is the only silver lining here. His grandson might be home before he finishes. Not that the boy could do anything to stop them from taking the still, or even keep these men from dragging him off to a cell somewhere, but the boy's arrival might stay their hand, because the old man is sure, like he is certain the sun would rise in the morning, that these men are not planning to let him live. Mother Nature lay on Father Thyme, breathing softly against his chest, her sweat-slickened body stuck to his own. The caboose reeked of old, damp towels, an odor that surely wasn't dissipating any time soon, so he had to ask, "Won't your uncle be mad that we, in his cabin?" She scratched gently at his chest with long, green-lacquered fingernails. "He'll be busy with the show for another hour or more, and then he's going to be supervising the packing up, so we have plenty of time to clean up, air it out, whatever. Stop worrying so much, Gringo. Even if he did find out, he'd get over it. He always does." "You do this often?" he asked, unsure if the question was too much, too early in their whatever this was. "Do I fuck everyone I meet, you mean?" "I don't like that word." "What? Fuck? It has its uses. Would you prefer I had asked, do I make love to everyone I meet?" "Is that what we did?" "Well, that would require one or both of us to be in love, no?" "I think I love you," he managed. "No, lovely. You love what we do together. You don't even know me. Not really." He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Are you something you ain't shown me?" he asked genuinely. She considered this, then shook her head. "No, I've only been myself." "Then yes, I love you, and I love the things we do together." She smiled up at him. "You're very sweet, Gringo. I like you a lot, too." "Just like? Only like?" he asked. Something huge was stuck in his throat. He couldn't bring it up and couldn't swallow it. It sat between his chin and chest like a clenched fist. "I don't know you well enough to love you, but I think I could, Jess. Now, shh. You will ruin everything with all these questions." It takes the old man over an hour to dismantle his proud work, or else it feels like it does, because he has no sense of time down here, no watch or lock, or no watch or clock to speak of, and can only judge the passage of the minutes by his prior experience. The two deputies and the clansmen load the tanks and tubing a piece at a time. It takes all three to move each of the 4 tanks. Then they each take bundles of copper tubing up in separate loads. They leave the exhaust port, and the old man supposes they must be planning to erect their new still outside, or else they would be transporting the whole rig to a place where ample ventilation already existed. The old man has not missed the fact that Sheriff Bobby's sidearm is no longer in its holster, although he'd not seen the man remove it. The gun dangles from a thick paw, the index finger resting on the trigger guard instead of the trigger, and the old man thanks God for that. At the very least, the sheriff won't shoot anyone by accident. On purpose, though, that may be a different story. The clansman stomps down the stairs into the man-made cavern, dusting his hands off on his jeans as he comes. "That's it, Uncle Bobby? You boys gonna ride out with me? No way I'm gonna be able to manage all this on my own." Yeah, tell them I said ride with you and for them to help you unload everything. I gotta run this feller in, and I'll be out that way in a jiff. That's right, the clansman says, chuckling as he turns to head back up the stairs. You go ahead and run him in, Unc. The clansman vanishes into the night, his low, fading laughter haunting the air in his wake. All right, then, the sheriff says and raises the gun, training it on the old man's chest. The old man stiffens but is resolute. He refuses to die begging for his life. He has too much stubborn pride for all that. He inhales at length, barreling his chest as if giving the sheriff a better, closer target, closes his eyes, and waits for the man to pull the trigger. To the car with you, says the sheriff. The old man lets out his pent-up breath, shaking with relieved laughter. Might this hateful son of a bitch only arrest him? It was too good to be true. Although the old man won't rot in jail, he has a backup plan for that, should the need arise. The sheriff steps to the side and waves the gun at the stairs. Go on up. The old man climbs the steps, one by one, until he exits into chilly night. He looks up at the stars, and he appreciates those stars like never before. What is up there, he wonders absently, beyond the reaches of this world? Is God looking down on him now, guiding the hands of these two-bit thieves pretending at law enforcement? Has God put these men in his path solely because he knows the old man wouldn't have stopped otherwise? Could be. His God worked in mysterious ways. He knew not to question his will, lest his own stubborn nature get in the way of the Lord's plan. He'd taken several steps toward the sheriff's car when he hears a sudden pop, and suddenly it is impossible to breathe. He staggers forward 2 more steps and drops to his knees. His hand goes to the sucking wound in his chest, and he knows he's been lung shot. His brain just hasn't come to grips with the situation yet. The sheriff's loathsome words reverberate in the old man's bones. Shouldn't have tried to run, you stubborn old coot. I, I, I. The old man stammers, willing his final words, his final curses upon all 4 of the men involved, the one present, and the 3 who are already on the road. Yet the tragedy of it all is that he never once thinks about his grandson, not once while his brain is dying in his skull. He thinks only of these criminals and this murderer, these bastards who have robbed him of everything, and the vengeance that would not be his to claim. The old man dies in mid-thought, his last synaptic burst cut off halfway through. I never got to. And we will never know how that should have ended. Okay, I'm gonna take a break there. We are at subchapter. When I get back, we're gonna finish it up because we only have like, I don't know, 16 pages left, and I just got through reading like 23. Anyways, we're at subchapter 3. I'll hit you guys up. Yeah. I'm gonna take a 10-minute break, and then I will be back, and we will continue on to finish this chapter. All right. I am back. Okay. Y'all ready? We are. Let me move the mic over again. We are on subchapter 13. If you're reading along at home in the paperback version, it's page 73. Okay. 13. At some point, Father Time fell asleep and dreamed he was standing at his mother's grave again, fresh thyme reaching up to him, blowing in a soft breeze. He broke off a stalk, pinched one end while pulling the base of the removed branch. Green bits rained onto his mother's final resting place, where each discarded leaf sprouted a new stalk that rose to meet the sun. He grabbed a new branch and repeated the process until he was in a field of swaying thyme. He had a sense of fatherly pride standing there among his creations. Off in the distance, he noticed for the first time a mirage of a fashion, a scene scored with heat waves, the edges shifting and blurring, figures running together, then fading from existence in tandem. This dream, which he knew to be a dream, was startlingly real. And he thought he could even smell the herbs all around him as he shielded his eyes from the oppressive sun of the strange land and attempted to see clearly what the distance held. He awoke to find Mother Nature dressing in the middle of her uncle's caboose. The air inside the car had chilled tremendously since he'd last been awake, but instead of finding his own clothes and warming himself under them, he simply watched a beautiful woman pull on her attire, one piece at a time, in a kind of reverse striptease that caused parts south of him to stiffen. She caught him staring and smiled. "Do you want to do it again? One more time for the road, gringo?" He grinned and groggily said, "I want nothing more." She once again disrobed, slowly, making every movement count, and they loved each other twice more, before both were spent and exhausted and thirsty beyond all comprehension. Laying together, spooning on the sofa, his front to her back, Father Time, his tongue swollen from activity and nearly solid with dryness, said, "I want to come with you." "Oh, Pappy," she said as she stroked the forearm he had draped over her. "You can't. Besides, your grandfather needs you. He won't be around forever, and I'm sure he wants to hand the farm down to you when the time comes. But I don't want that. I want to be with you, on the road, with you." She worked her hips, grinding against him. "You say that now, but what happens when I'm old and tired, and I don't work like I did before? Then I'll love you in other ways. I want to grow old with you." With some effort, she rolled, almost falling off the sofa more than once, until she was facing him. She petted his cheek and played with his beard, all the while her eyes never left his. "You can't. I'm sorry, but we don't have the room, nor the food. We set out with a certain amount rationed for each worker, and we just can't take on anyone else. I'm sorry, Papi. I really am." He nodded, even though he wanted to fight her on it. He could take care of himself, show her that he was self-reliant, independent, but let it go. "You should go home," she said. "This was fun, and there's always next time. He laughed mirthlessly. Yeah, years from now. She kissed him gently on the cheek, the temple. Am I not worth the wait, you silly man? He kissed her lips, and she kissed him back. When she finally pulled away, he said, You're worth everything, and you always will be. Then you will wait for me to return? Do I have any other choice? He tried not to say too angrily. No, no, you don't. They lay together for a while longer, until the ever-present noise of the circus performances and the crowd's reaction faded to nothing. Then they both got dressed, together this time, and she kissed him goodbye. Where are you guys heading next? He asked her at the door of his truck. Are you going to show up there? No, he lied. Don't do that, gringo. I don't like it when you are dishonest. I'm sorry. He leaned in to kiss her one last time, but she pulled away before his lips connected. Go, gringo, and remember me. I could never forget you, he said, and he meant every word of it. Goodbye, she repeated. Goodbye. And he stepped up into the cab of the truck and headed home. If you're just now joining us, I am reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. Links are down there in the doobly-doo if you want to get a signed copy, or just get a regular one on Amazon in either ebook or paperback. 14. Father Time saw the glow of the fire 2 miles out. He didn't know what it was at that point, but that didn't stop an icy ball of dread from forming in his core. The closer he got, the colder his insides felt, until he came close enough to see that it could only be his property ablaze. And his blood finally froze solid in his veins. The county fire truck, its water tank only slightly bigger than the cab of Grandpa Henry's panel truck, sat at the road, surrounded by a group of men doing absolutely nothing at all aside from watching his homestead burn. One was even drinking a beer from a bottle that resembled one of Grandpa's stores far more than Father Time liked to admit. 2 sheriff deputy vehicles were parked in the driveway, a good distance from the inferno. Father Time, his mind speeding through hundreds of explanations for all of this, pulled around them all, rolling through the grass and scrub that lined the drive, then parked a few yards from the fully engulfed house. From here, he could see the barn was ablaze too, and could feel the heat sitting on his person like clothing 2 sizes too small for his frame. Everything he owned was inside those structures, and it couldn't be ignored that both were, at this point, a total loss. Hopefully, Grandpa was all right. He jumped from the cab, hollering for his grandfather, and heard someone else hollering in between his shouts. He followed the voice around the side of the house to where the sheriff's car was parked a good distance from the fiery entrance to the barn. His grandfather lay face down in the dirt, between the barn and the sheriff's vehicle. Father Time ignored the man in the brown uniform with a badge glinting over his breast, who was yelling at him as he approached, and collapsed beside his grandfather, trembling hands outstretched, wanting to touch the old man, but not knowing if he should. Grandpa Henry's body was dead center in a pool of bloodied mud. His back wasn't rising and falling like it should be. The old man was completely, utterly, disastrously still. He was dead. It was obvious, yet Father Time refused to believe it. Search warrant. He tried to run from me. I had no other choice, the sheriff was saying. Father Time sprung from the ground, the world blurring behind his tears, and charged the man, screaming, You killed him! Strangers seemed to appear out of nowhere, grabbing Father Time about the arms and waist, hauling him back, away, away from his grandfather's corpse, away from the man who'd murdered him. He set fire to the house to try and hide what he was doing, boy. We couldn't save it. I promise you that we tried. The sheriff continued to jack his jaw, spewing insanities, fallacies, impossibilities. What did you do? Father Time sobbed from the clutches of those surrounding him. You left us no choice, son, the sheriff said, but Father Time knew the man was lying. He could smell the dishonesty coming off the sheriff in thick bars, like a spotlight shone onto his black, lying heart. And he also knew, without a shred of doubt in his heart or mind, that this, all of this, had come about because he dared question, even internally, where Grandpa Henry was getting all that money. The fates had finally come full circle. Death was the wages of sin, his grandpa used to say. The devil's dues needed to be paid, and Grandpa Henry had paid with his life. They put Father Time, screaming and weeping, into the back of one of the deputies' cars, where he sat, watching the fire consume the house and barn, those who had been called to the catastrophe milling about, doing nothing to save whatever might have been salvaged had someone acted, had they done anything besides gawk and pace. Father Time buried his face in his hands and roared. He sobbed for some time, until the back door opened again and a hand reached in to escort him out. Pawing tears from his face with the back of his hands, he tried to focus on who stood before him and not the crumbling, fiery remains of his homestead in the background. Did you know what your father was doing under the barn, son? Asked the sheriff, his voice hinting at kindness that never reached his eyes. Looking at this man, Father Time felt an unbridled urge to throttle the life from him. Whether Grandpa had done whatever this man thought he'd done was beside the point. This man had ended Grandpa Henry's life, and there should be justice for that. Any kind of justice Father Time would gladly accept. Do you know where he kept his money? The sheriff asked, and Father Time's tears dried up quicker than America had in January of 1920. What did you say? Father Time growled. The money he made from selling the shine, boy, don't play dumb. So that's where the money had come from. Grandpa had been making moonshine and taking it out of town to sell it. Someone had spilled the beans, and now Father Time was facing the aftermath, alone, and all because he dared ruminate on the origins of the money. I don't know what you're talking about, Father Time said through clenched teeth. The sheriff sighed. Ugh. You know damn well he's been spreading that blood money around town and paying off people's debts. Now you tell me, son, how do you think your grandfather was capable of all that? Father Time didn't say another word. Not when the sheriff threatened to arrest him, and not after he was stuffed back into the deputy's car and driven to the jail in Washout, where the sheriff's department was located. On the way, Father Time sat silent in the back seat. The sun came up, giving light to the day, just in time to see the fate of Thomas Jackson. They must have caught him the night Thomas had fled from the revelation between Father Time's thighs, because the beautiful young man was wearing the same clothes, only these were stained with blood and dirt. With a heavy heart, Father Time realized they'd used the straps from Thomas's duffel bag to hang him. They'd strung up the young man in the middle of town from a great oak tree around which children now played. Happy little white children, up at daybreak, all unsupervised and bursting with glee, singing ugly songs to the strange fruit above them. No one deserved that, Father Time knew. Yes, Thomas had been ugly to him, had broken his fragile heart, but he shouldn't have died this way, and he certainly shouldn't be the source of amusement for a bunch of screaming children. Father Time raged at the cruelty of the world, the cruelty his mother and grandfather had tried to shelter him from, and he promised himself that should he be able to have should he be able to have children one day, he would not hide the true nature of the world from them. He'd educate and prepare them and send them reluctantly out into this horror show armed with everything they needed to survive. The car passed Thomas's swinging corpse and entered downtown, where the sheriff's office sat square and alone, set off from the town trading post and the train station. One of the deputies led him inside and into a cell, then locked the door behind him. Father Time sat down on the single bunk provided, smoldering with rage but no longer crying, and thought about what the future held and whether it was worth the effort of finding out. If you're just joining us, I'm reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune. New book under a new pen name, S.E. Johnson. Go check it out. Links down there in the doobly-doo. You got Amazon where you can get the ebook or the paperback, or you can buy a signed copy from me directly. Let me get some water. $15. Father Time slept not once the 3 days he was locked up. Then, on the morning of his 4th day, he had a visitor. Cassie Rutledge, the town midwife and his mother's longtime friend, came down the hall and stood aside as a new deputy Father Time hadn't met yet unlocked his cage and allowed him to exit. Cassie was a short yet stout woman, all chest and torso, with stumpy arms and legs, and 2 fingers missing on her left hand, ring and pinky. She'd lost both to the greedy jaws of a German shepherd long before he'd been born. Story had it that the dog, who belonged to a woman Cassie was helping through a difficult birth, thought Cassie meant to hurt his mistress more so than help, so he'd snapped at her, locking her fingers in his powerful jaws and sawing his head from side to side. He didn't take them off, nothing as clean as that. The town doctor at the time, Jack Manning, had removed them once he figured out there was no saving the digits. Rumor had it that Cassie still had both fingers in a jar of alcohol on her mantel above her fireplace, but Father Time hadn't seen such with his own eyes, even though he'd spent quite a bit of time there in his youth on the occasions when Cassie babysat him. Her hair was, as usual, tied up in a ponytail behind her head. A bar of gold struck through with gray down the middle of her back, all the way to her crack. Today she wore raggedy jeans and a threadbare blouse. The scarf his mother had made for Cassie's 50th birthday was wrapped around her neck in a loose loop. She looked the worse for wear, but couldn't have possibly looked any worse than he felt at present. "Time to go home, honey," Cassie said, her eyes full of grief and understanding. He knew Cassie had loved his grandfather, much more than friends loved friends, but Grandpa Henry hadn't reopened his heart for business after he lost his wife, and was known to say, "There is only one woman for me, and she belongs to the Lord now." If Grandpa's religion were to be believed, Grandma and he had been reunited in heaven, finally, and although Father Time had given up on Grandpa's God, he still hoped that much was true, that there was a heaven, and Grandpa had his love by his side once again. The thought brought Father Time a modicum of joy that shone weakly through the cloak of sorrow smothering him. Yes, he hoped heaven was real, because that meant, logically, that hell also existed, waiting, biding its time until Father Time sent the sheriff through its fiery gates. Cassie drove in silence through and out of Washout. The children who had been haunting Thomas's body like gleeful ghosts were gone, and so was Thomas. Father Time wondered what the monsters who'd killed him had done with the corpse. Surely Thomas hadn't received a Christian burial, but Father Time also didn't want to think too hard on where the young man had ended up. Would Thomas's mother cling to the memory of Thomas as she had of W.H.? Could there be a greater pain in all the world, worse than losing not one, but two of your children? They're going to cremate Henry, Cassie said when they were a mile from the farm. You probably won't get the ashes. Those assholes, pardon my language, aren't that nice. But they'll get theirs, baby. Don't you worry. Your grandpa saw to that. What do you mean? Father Time asked, his interest suddenly piqued. I know someone, a woman. She takes care of burdens for people, and I should say, well and true, that the sheriff has become a burden on you. Am I right? Father Time nodded as Cassie drove. Good. Then we'll stop by the house and collect Henry's money. Your money now, I suppose it is, because we gonna need it to pay her. Is that all right with you? You know where Grandpa kept his money? Yes, sir. It's a grave situation, one might say. You up for digging? Of course. If he'd been any more blind, he'd be walking around with a cane. Father Time laughed sadly and said, Yeah, I reckon I can do some digging. He didn't have to dig far. The earth was soft and easily managed, and Father Time found the first bag only 6 or 7 inches under the surface. Cassie sat in the car back in front of the house, keeping watch, should anyone have followed them. She was supposed to honk the horn twice if anyone pulled in, but that never happened. All in all, Father Time extracted. All in all, Father Time extracted 34 bags of money, all nearly bursting with bills, each one tied off with rough twine that cinched closed the open end. After his first trip of 3 bags, all he could manage alone, Cassie drove the car around the burned out shell of the house, through the crops no one would ever again harvest, to the family plot. She helped Father Time load the rest of the bags into the trunk, and then, when the trunk was full, into the back seat. By the time they were done, the car sat low on its springs, and Father Time worried they'd have to unload some of the money just to get down the road. We ain't got time for 2 trips, Cassie informed him. She's waiting on us. One more thing, Father Time said. He jogged off toward the wreckage of his old home to pick through the scorched wood and debris until he found the stairs leading to the cellar. The fire had mostly spared everything below the 3rd step. Father Time stretched his long legs over the blackened stairs at the top and tried his weight on the first untouched one. It held. He followed the stairs down, into the damp stench of the cellar, where he sought out and found an unopened can of coffee. Back upstairs, he headed for the barn, which was nothing more than a charred frame at this point. He found the wall where all the farming tools had been shelved and sifted through the ashy, smoky remains with his boot until he came across a hoe whose handle had been reduced to cinder. Using his shirt as a mitt, he pulled the hoe blade from the char and snapped off what was left of the ruined handle. Then he headed for the well. He lowered the hoe, still smoking with retained heat, in the provided bucket, down into the chilly water, where it hissed briefly, then fell silent. He tugged the bucket up and retrieved the now cool hoe blade, which he used to crack open the fresh can of coffee. He dumped its contents into the earth and carried the empty can back to his mother's grave. Carefully, like a father handling a baby. Carefully, like a father handling a babe, he pulled 3 stalks of thyme from his mother's final resting place, scooping dirt and roots and all into the empty coffee can. He tamped down the dirt, added some more, and hoped that would do. "What's that for?" Cassie asked when he returned to the car. "It's all I got left." Cassie nodded. "I'm gonna have to call you Father Time from now on, huh?" If you're just now joining us, I am reading The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you'd like to grab the book yourself, links are down there in the doobly-doo. You can get an ebook or a paperback off of Amazon, or you can buy a signed copy from me. It's 2 different links. If you're in the U.S., use the U.S. one. If you're in the U.K. or anywhere else outside of the U.S., Canada and Mexico included, use the UK link, and I will refund you whatever of the shipping I don't use. Continuing on. 16. The witchery woman lived far east of town, in a tar paper shack, at the foot of Mount Clarence. Cassie's car took the rutted dirt road to the woman's shack slowly, but their backsides still paid for it. Father Time got out of the car feeling as if he'd just spent a week on the back of an unruly horse. Beulah Blackwood, the witchery woman, was a thin and ancient white woman with one tooth in the entirety of her head, top and just right of center, which she showed off a lot because, for whatever reason, she wouldn't stop grinning like a plumb fool. She wore a black dress typical of a mourning widow, and her lanky salt and pepper hair clung about her head like a nest of oily snakes. She smelled awful. Garlic, body odor, and even an underlying hint of ammonia-heavy urine, like cat piss, although Father Time didn't see any evidence that the woman kept felines. The interior of her home smelled twice as bad, as if something had died under the floorboards years ago and no one had ever bothered to remove it. On the walls hung animal skulls of all kinds: deer, squirrels, cows, even a ram's head, curling horns and all. Her bed, nothing more than a bundle of sticks with a ratty blanket thrown over it all, sat in one corner, while a round table, pockmarked with knife wounds and stained with various unknown fluids Father Time didn't want to question, sat in the center of it all. He spied no cook stove, cookware, nor any kind of sink. Other than the bed and table, the one-room lodging was bereft of furniture. Beulah Blackwood spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. "You brought the money?" "Yes," Cassie told the woman, then directed her next words at Father Time. "Get a sack from the back seat." "An entire sack?" Father Time asked. Not that he was shocked. He only wanted clarification. "Yes, one should be fine." Father Time chose the heaviest sack in the bunch, because what did he care about all this money at this point? His mama and grandpa were gone. No amount of money in the world could bring them back or make him feel better about their absence. He would have given this strange old woman the world had she even hinted at being able to return both his mother and grandfather to him, happy and healthy, unscathed by the trials of their lives. After all, money had been the cause of every loss he'd ever known. No money for doctor visits had taken Mama from him, and greed had stolen his grandfather. But if what Cassie had said of the witchery woman were true, at least Grandpa Henry would find justice. Father Time dropped the heavy sack onto the floor by the table. The witchery woman didn't open the bag, much less count its contents. She only nodded and pointed to the matchstick bed in the corner. She told Father Time, "Lie down." Then to Cassie, "You wait outside. Don't come in no matter what you hear." Cassie said she wouldn't and exited through the room's only door. "Lie!" the witchery woman hollered when she saw Father Time hadn't moved. He shuffled over to the bed and sat on its edge, testing the strength of its creaking frame. When he was sure the whole thing wouldn't collapse beneath him, he laid back. The witchery woman worked quickly, yanking his shirt up and over his face. Something cold pressed into the flesh of his stomach, and he ground his teeth together to keep from crying out. A sensation that felt as if he was being opened, like the zipper on a pair of pants, one tooth at a time, rattled through him. Warm blood. He was sure that's exactly what it was pouring from him, cascaded down his sides. Somehow, he remained utterly still. Truth be told, he didn't want to see what was happening below. The shirt over his face was a blessing in that regard, until it wasn't. Beulah Blackwood snatched his shirt from his face and bade him look down. Reluctantly, he did so. "Look and see this." She held up a gory fist, around which was wrapped a spool of bloody intestines. His intestines. "My God," he muttered, but still, he wasn't afraid. Despite seeing this woman with a fistful of his guts, he was oddly, genuinely calm, amazed at what he was seeing, the surreal nature of it. This can't be real, he told himself, and begged to believe it. "This," she barked into his face, "is your tether to us. Do not cut the string, or you will not return. Am I clear?" Yes, he stuttered. "Good. Now, get up." The witchery woman backed away from the bed, allowing him space to rise. He could feel his insides unspooling within him, giving her more and more line, and tried to ignore it. The sensation was odd, unreal, and all logic said that he was going to die if he didn't get all that back inside him and stitched closed before too long. But through it all, he remained calm, as if, and most likely, he was under some sort of spell. With some effort, he stood, swaying, everything cloaked in a dreamlike gauze, fluffy and ragged at the edges. She led him to the door. "Only you can open the door. Only you can go through. Think of night, and it will be night. Think he is asleep, and that too shall be. Think harm, and he will be harmed. Whatever you wish, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Understand?" "No," he said honestly. "You will. Now, open the door and see, and make it be." She moved aside, allowing him to pass by. He gripped the door's bone handle and wrenched it open. "17. On the other side of the door was a bedroom. Quiet, homey, unassuming. A bed sat in the middle of the room, its headboard pressed into the center of the far wall. A bucolic piece of art hung above the headboard, and under the covers draped over this bed's surface, 2 bodies rose and fell with breath, with life. Father Time moved forward, feeling more of his insides becoming outsides as he approached the bed. He watched in stunned disbelief as the quilt drew back without any input from him. He'd only thought that he should pull back the covers, see who was underneath them, and the quilt had moved of its own accord.
Think he is asleep, and that too shall be.
Father Time knew who was under that quilt before the face was revealed. He could see clearly in the dark room, as if his eyes were lanterns burning brightly, only illuminating what he saw and not the rest of the space. Is this how God, in all his omnipotent ways, looked down on his creations? Or was this the devil's magic? Did either exist? Sheriff Robert Justin Michael Baumgardner, whose nephew called him Bobby, snored like a freight train hauling angry tigers. His hair was a mussed palm tree, its fronds pointing every which way, some of it lying over his closed eyelids and the flickering orbs underneath. Father Time watched the man sleep for only a second before reaching down and taking Sheriff Bobby's neck in both hands. The sheriff dreams of having sex with a beautiful woman he's arrested when suddenly he cannot breathe. His eyes roll behind his lids, but he cannot open them. No matter how much he wants to, no matter how hard he tries, they are sealed shut as if stuck fast by pine pitch. As the dream vanishes, and he is stuck in his own head, unable to draw air into his lungs, unable to save himself, and he thinks about the old man he'd killed, that dumb lump of a moonshiner who had hid away that black boy, the same old man who'd played Santa Claus all over creation, and the sheriff feels hell at his heels, unbearably hot and growing hotter still, while his pulse thuds in his eyes he cannot open, and he is a long, long time dying. His wife will wake in the morning and find nothing out of place. No secret door leading to some witch's abode, no slimy trail of bloodstains, as if wounded snakes had slithered across her floor in the night. She finds her husband of 17 years dead under his undisturbed covers, and she will think, what a goddamn shame. He was in the prime of his life. Such a good man gone too soon. She and everyone else will think his heart gave out, and in a way, it did. No oxygen to the brain, which gives instructions to the heart and regulates its beating, will do that. Amen. Father Time stood over the dead man until his wife woke up, because he needed to see the aftermath. Coveted was the sorrow that would overcome her suffering. He needed for her to know that it was he who'd taken the man she loved. But seeing her crying form in the light of morning brought Father Time no pleasure, and he fled back the way he'd come, back into the witchery woman's abode and whatever solitary life he had waiting for him. He opened his eyes and saw he was still in the witchery woman's bed, his face still covered with his shirt. He pulled it down, smoothed it out, and sat up. The ancient crone was at her table, emotionlessly watching him, supervising his return to his own world. He placed his hands to his stomach, yet found no wound. He hiked up the end of his shirt and ran shaking fingers over unmarred flesh. He looked up, said, "Was it all a dream?" The witchery woman shook her head, keeping her eyes trained on his.
It is real, and it is done. "18. Cassie drove him to her house, where they counted the money in full. His estimates last week had been way off. Of course, he'd known that he'd undercounted, using 2,000 a trip as a lowball to begin with, but he could never have expected how much money was actually there. $507,000, mostly in $100 bills that Father Time suspected Grandpa Henry had acquired at banks all over his route, wherever he traveled, turning in bags and bags of $1, $2, and $5 bills, exchanging them for all these hundreds, which would be much easier to handle. There was even a handful of $1,000 bills, of which Father Time had never seen the like. And he knew exactly what he was going to do with it all. I want you to take this, Father Time said, offering Cassie a sack worth $100,000. Boy, you know I can't accept that. That's your money. Your grandfather worked hard for it. And now it's yours. Go on. I won't take no for an answer. You about as stubborn as your granddad, you know that? Father Time smiled wanly. Yes, ma'am. I should hope so. You have his eyes and your mother's smile. I see 'em both in you. Thank you. He began grabbing bags to take out to the car. You leaving already? Cassie asked, her face revealing how much she didn't want him to leave. He barely knew this woman, but the bond between her and Grandpa Henry overflowed, trapping him in the tide. Yes, ma'am. I got some miles to travel, I think. Where are you going? Father Time thought a second, then said, I got me a train to catch. Cassie Rutledge, the woman Grandpa Henry might have married had his widower heart ever healed enough to move on, watches Father Time from her stoop as he drives down her lane, out of her life, and into the storm clouds lurking on the horizon. She'll need to pull her laundry from the line. It's liable to pour soon. She would think about Father Time often over the years, but never so much as when it rained. Every time a storm rolled in, she'd wonder if he were out there, somewhere, thinking about his grandfather, his mother, or maybe even Cassie herself. She remembers vividly the day that Myrtle came to her with news of the baby growing inside her, and how Henry Waycott had hit the road to track the man who'd raped his baby girl, to kill him dead and leave him stuffed with his own parts, like the cornucopia of filth Stephen Justardin had been in life, and how she'd told Myrtle there was a woman she knew, a woman who could take care of unwanted burdens, birthed or not. Funny how things come full circle. Henry had refused to let Beulah Blackwood terminate the pregnancy, and Cassie couldn't help but wonder now if Henry had known, all 2 decades and then some in the past, that this child born of violence would one day need to avenge his death. Funny how things like that are mistaken for coincidence, isn't it? But we know there is no such thing as coincidence. We've learned that much over the past century. There is only fate and her ugly sister tragedy. Although happiness threads through the loam of our lives, it's the losses that hold their stitch unlike any other, weaving into the joyous times, tainting them, assuring us that we will never wear happiness again, for it has suffered rot and is threadbare. And like the full stretch and birth of life, weathered and fleeting. Every beginning has an end, and every ending is a new beginning. But as they say, the show must go on. So onward, my friends. Onward. All right, chapter 1 done and dusted. I have just read from The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by my new pen name, S.E. Johnson. If you're interested in checking out the book, there's a link down there in the doobly-doo. Just look down in the description. You can either buy an ebook or a paperback off of Amazon, or you can buy a signed copy from me. If you're in the U.S. and want a signed copy, use the U.S. link. If you are outside of the U.S., Canada and Mexico included, use the link for UK customers. And yes, the link for the UK customers is expensive, but I will refund you any extra shipping that I don't use. Okay. So thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate you hanging out. I will be back next Wednesday, probably around the same time. I have to work around my kids' schedule. They work in the movie theater. So who knows when? It might be afternoon, it might be night, but it'll definitely be on Wednesday. Okay. This VOD, the full thing will be up on my channel next week, probably Wednesday. I uploaded the first episode today, so if you want to go check that out, if you're not all caught up, you can watch it. Just check out my videos page. But yeah, once again, this has been The Last Freak Show, Book 1, Flame and Fortune, by me, under a new pen name, S.E. Johnson. Until next Wednesday, I have been E, you have been you. This has been The Last Freak Show podcast, live reading, whatever you want to call it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.